So, analysis paralysis is when you feel the need to hyper analyze every single detail and every single potential outcome of something that you actually become stuck because you're just thinking about what if that happened and what if this happened and what if this didn't go right this way and then what if and you're not wrong, because all of those circumstances have the possibility of happening, and all of those circumstances have the possibility of reality. However, the paralysis portion is now you can't make any decisions because you're stuck in the loop of thinking about all the outcomes and which outcome is going to be the least worst outcome and which is going to be the best outcome. And you're trying to anticipate every single detail, every single scenario, every single possibility, to the point now your nervous system goes into freeze. It goes into, I cannot make any decision because there's so many decisions, and now all micro decisions feel so heavy in my physical body that now this feels like a burden on my shoulder, and now I'm getting my intuition all messed up because I don't know what to do. So if you resonate with that, I'm going to cover in this episode a couple of different ways that this analysis paralysis is destructive, not just to your body, not just to your life, but also on a nervous system level. Okay, so if this is your first time on the Playground podcast, go ahead and grab your tea, sit down, take some notes. My name is Shanila Sattar. This is your space for spiritual exploration, personal development, self-mastery, magic, mysticism, and remembering the world is your playground. So you get to have fun, be childlike, be curious, and just don't take anything too seriously. So analysis paralysis, my friends, have you been there? Did you resonate with what I said when I introduced this episode about how you feel like you can't really take any action because you're kind of just like trying to anticipate all the options, you know? And part of it's because you're really smart. You know, your brain is so like calculated, and it has the ability to see so many perspectives, and you're probably really into game theory, so you're like working out the scenarios in all different ways, and that's an important skill to have too. Like, it's not to say, oh my gosh, like that's a bad skill. Absolutely not. But and also there are moments when it's like not working in your favor. You know, it's actually making you feel like now you can't make any decisions because you're at a stagnation point. And another way to break it down in psychology, there's this idea where I don't know if there's anything called analysis paralysis, but there is like a choice paralysis. And you've heard me talk about this on the Playground podcast before, where when we're presented with too many choices, we're actually not as likely to make a choice because there's choice overwhelm. So for example, if you are trying to select between two things, it's easier than if you're trying to select between 10 things. And if you're trying to select between 5 things, because the more options there are, you're trying to weigh too many things now. And so for some people, it's like, well, if there's 10 things and half of them I don't want, so it's automatically not 10, it's automatically from a group of 5. There's like a quick decision sorting that happens. But for some people, it's like, oh no, 10, and I'm actually about to walk away from this choice than to be able to make a choice. So it's not that important when it's happening to unimportant things, but there's certain things that happen in your life that are more important and that have more consequence, where decisions are necessary, and decisions come from being able to be confident, and decisions come from being able to trust yourself. Decisions come from having a certain type of intuitive alignment with what it is that you're deciding about. But when you're analyzing things from such a linear, logical space, your intuition doesn't always have a space to talk because it's so linear. It's so logical. It's so hyper intellectual that your intuition, when it's talking, is not able to contribute anything. Like, it's not able to say, well, logically on the paper, it looks this way, but I feel something different. But how are you trying to calculate your feelings into this decision-making process rather than what seems more linear and logical, right? And so this is why you'll find that sometimes your mind says one thing, but your heart says a different, or your gut says something different. And actually, through my work in the healing arts, I've definitely concluded that different people's intuitions sit in different places. So even though in wisdom traditions we say intuition is in the gut and the stomach, some people's intuition I feel like is heavier in the throat or the chest area. So it is also important for you to understand that when you're paralyzed, what is it that you're trying to express? That is the conclusion that I'll draw for you, is that there is some form of expression that is wanting to come out from you that is not necessarily getting the opportunity to come out. And sometimes the expression is of fear, but I do want to break it down for you, because it's not to say, oh my gosh, I'm afraid, and so that's why I shouldn't do that. Sometimes fear actually shows you why you should do that, and fear isn't this like negative thing all the time. It's often, the consequence of fear is negative in our lives sometimes, because that's how we're interpreting that. But sometimes fear can actually show you where your growth edge is, and where it is that you're trying to evolve into, and what scares you that is really aligned for you, so fear can just definitely be this like expressive part of you that you can explore, but your fear is also wanting to be expressed. And if you're suppressing your fear with logic, and if you're suppressing the message that fear has to show you, and the message the fear that wants to show you with logic, it becomes this suppressed voice. So a lot of people's fear wants to be expressed through their throat to say, hey, I'm actually afraid to make this decision because I'm afraid that I'm going to fail, right? And so, okay, now you're being real about it. It's not really that like you couldn't choose. It's that you know exactly what to choose. You're just not choosing that because you're afraid. So good thing you said it, good thing your voice like got up the gall to say that. And sometimes fear is from your heart. It's to say like, I'm actually afraid that I'm not going to succeed, right? Like, so there's this fear of not being enoughness that holds in your chest. So if you're actually afraid to put yourself out there because you truly want to do this thing, but again, it's this fear of being rejected, or perhaps feeling abandoned or feeling unwanted, because there you are, you put it out there and still like nobody wanted it, right? And that's that fear of that. And sometimes the fear is in your gut, where your gut is saying, actually, I really think we should do this, like I really think we should do this, but you're not listening to your gut intuition. And energetically, emotions sit in your physical body. They're not linear things. They're processed in your mind. The narrative is created in your mind, and your mind can create emotions in your body, but mainly emotions are created in your physical body and then sent up to your mind to interpret. So when you're experiencing these emotions processing through your body, primarily the one that I'm talking about right now is this emotion of fear, or this energy of fear. And fear has the ability to show you what you actually want. It shows you the truth of where it is that you're preventing yourself from being able to make a decision because the fear is too overwhelming, and the discomfort of fear. So earlier, I also mentioned that analysis paralysis will take over your nervous system, because that's essentially what fear does. It overcompensates for the emotion. And a nervous system that is in constant fear will do one of two things, right? Like it'll either be in a shutdown, meaning that's often where that paralysis comes from. Like literally the phrase was analysis paralysis. And so when your nervous system goes into freeze mode, or it goes into shutdown mode, it basically says like, I am not able to make any choices. I'm not able to do anything. And that's how the fear is kind of manifesting and showing up in your nervous system that way, and behaviorally that way. Now, this can also translate the complete other direction, where now you're driven by fear. So everything that you're doing in life and the choices that you're making, well, I'm going to take that back. It's not everything that you're doing in life. It's whatever it is that you're hyper analyzing about. This can make it seem like now you're taking too many actions towards the thing. And there is such thing as doing too much. You know what I mean? It's like you understand, like overdoing it and being hyper active towards something, and like being so proactive to the point it's actually just not giving enough breathing room to whatever it is. So these two extremes is not where your body wants to be. Your body doesn't want to be, one, shut down and be overtaken and overwhelmed with fear. It also doesn't want to be on the other extreme where now you're acting from fear. And let me go further into telling you what acting from fear can practically look like. So it is that overdoing that I just said. So now you're doing too much. And it can also be doing the wrong things, so you trying to overcompensate your actions by, taking actions on the wrong things. So you're hyper fixating and hyper focusing on certain things that don't really have that much importance, but because fear is running you, you're kind of like keeping yourself busy. It makes you look productive. It makes you look like you're checking a bunch of shit off your list, but you're not actually doing the action towards the things that are important and more impactful towards whatever it is that you're trying to get done. You're just kind of like doing busy work, And so on these two extremes, you're not necessarily dealing with making a decision. Like you're still not being able to make a decision that is in alignment to a regulated nervous system. Because the thing about a body that is in any kind of survival state, whether it's that freeze state that I just described, or whether it's in that hyperactivity state I also described, it can't make reasonable decisions. It makes decisions out of survival. And many of us are used to that. That is some of our default states where I only know how to make decisions from, being shut down, or I only make decisions from being hyper aroused and hyperactive. And I'm just in this like troubleshooting mode and just over proactive kind of mode. But what does it mean to make a calm, cool, collected decision that doesn't feel so charged by fear? And I'm saying charged because if fear as an emotion is energy, energy has a charge. Energy doesn't have a meaning until we attach a meaning. In the same way that like we can attach a meaning to fear as a negative and be like, oh no, fear is this bad thing that's taking over my life. Or we could attach a different meaning to say like, oh, fear is showing me this X, Y, and Z thing about my life. I might not like it, but it doesn't mean it's like not helpful to me. There's different variations of these perspectives for sure. But as you're relating yourself and as you're navigating your experience and relationship with fear, you're going to start to see that this paralysis is just a little bit more calmer. So you get out of this shutdown state where you're not being driven by the fear of doing something or not doing something, the fear of picking the right thing or not picking the right thing, the fear of what's going to happen and this process and da. It's like all the what ifs start to become less scary. They don't go away because all of those things are still on the table, right? Like if for any given thing, there's many different possibilities. It's not just like a binary possibility. It's like, oh, it's either going to go right or it's not going to go right? It's not that. There's like so many variations and in between. So those options don't go away. They just become less hyperfixated in your reality. You're able to see the evidence of the things working out. You're able to train your mind to experience the positive outcomes more so than the negative outcomes. It doesn't mean that you cannot consider negative outcomes, because I do think that considering negative outcomes help you be prepared in certain ways, or they help you learn about certain things in certain ways. So nothing is good or bad. Like analysis is not a bad thing. Like analysis is great. But if you're only hyper analyzing without being able to include the energy of emotions that are also involved in decision making, then you're kind of missing the point. You're only using 50% of the information when there's other information as available there as well. So a couple of weeks ago, I did make an episode about being too smart for your own good. And I said, you're smart intellectually, but what the heck about your emotional intelligence? And that comment still stands true, is that sometimes our analysis paralysis is that we're very hyper intelligent on paper, on linear logical things, but then our emotional intelligence is a little less developed. And it's not that you cannot develop it. That is possible for you to develop, but you do have to recognize when emotions come into your body, how they're releasing and processing in your body without attaching these like exact meanings to what the emotion is and why it's here and calling it bad or good or negative or positive or all the connotations. It's like, oh, it's just here. And just like fear, right? Like it's just here. And then what I do with that actually is my free will, right? It is your free will to decide, like, is that something that takes over you? In which case, that is your choice to do that. And you have the opportunity to not do that through learning how to regulate your nervous system. And there's also an opportunity to say, I think that this needs to necessarily take over my life. I'm acknowledging that the fear is here. How can I navigate and communicate with this fear instead of it running the show? Okay, so we can keep talking about analysis paralysis, and do me a favor, message me on our Discord. It's linked in my show notes, and go ahead and find the Discord. It is a space for healing arts practitioners, for perfectionists and people pleasers and self-doubters. We're doing a little conversating in there. Let me know what episodes and what topics of episodes you want to discuss on the playground in the next couple of months. And I'll take your suggestions. I'll give you a little shout out on the show if I go with one of your suggestions, but I would love to know what kind of conversations should we have. So friends, I will leave you that link right in the show notes so you can click onto it directly. And let me know if you're interested to work one-on-one with me inside a mentorship or come train to become a certified breathwork facilitator. I'll leave all those links in the show notes as well. So go ahead and message me inside the Discord, and just remember, the world is your playground. And until next time, I will catch you soon.